But can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers. Is it imaginable?
Next, we have big news coming up from the tech world. Elon Musk's Neuralink has received the green light from the US Food and Drug Administration for its human trial. Neuralink, on the other hand, has been investigated by federal agencies multiple times. In May, US lawmakers urged regulators to investigate the process of animal testing at Neuralink. There were concerns about rushed and failed experiments. The Department of Transportation is also looking into whether Neuralink transported dangerous pathogens without proper safety measures. While the U.S. Department of Agriculture is probing Neuralink for potential animal welfare violations, the company hasn't commented on these investigations yet.
They're building hardware from scratch, and they're putting it in large animals. For the pig, the electrodes were implanted in somatosensory cortex, allowing them to measure sensory activity, like that of taking a step. Every time that particular neuron they were listening to fired, you would hear this little pop or click from the audio channel. And so the moment I heard it, right, it's like, oh yeah, they got neurons. You just recognize it instantly. You know what neurons sound like if you've been listening to them for decades. And that's what they were communicating, right? They were telling the field, we've got neurons. Pay attention.
And overnight, it seemed the industry took notice. Then, in April of 2021, Neuralink released the so-called Mind Pong video.
Pager was the name. It's a rhesus macaque, which is, the type of monkey that is very commonly used in this field. Implanted with 2 of the N1 devices, the Neuralink devices, performing brain control. It's
a man who can slap but can also stroke. Going in the wind as a patty of the tree that is naked. Yes, we're right on.
Of a cursor on a screen. That's extremely significant because here Neuralink is showing their new hardware, their new device in their hands works in a monkey. Their new hardware, their new device in their hands works in a monkey. That's the level that's necessary to convince the scientific community, to convince the FDA that you're ready to go into human clinical trials. That's the evidence the FDA is looking for.
The recording power of the N1 device and pager was eye-opening because of the sheer number of individual electrodes that had been implanted.
There was definitely a lot of clever engineering that went into that to build a device that can transmit 2048 electrodes worth of spiking information, right, of digital ones and zeros of spikes over a radio wirelessly. And when you have that many channels, the performance that you should be able to get should eclipse what we've been able to do in the academic field. The maximum number of electrodes I've ever recorded from is 200 to 300.
So with all those electrodes, how does a device like the N1 get implanted in a subject's brain?
Make no mistake, this is neurosurgery. It is not a joke. This requires cutting the skin, getting down to skull, drilling a hole in the skull, exposing what's called the dura, which is this protective layer of tissue that surrounds the brain, cutting the dura, folding it back to expose the brain, and then you get to the surface of the brain where you can implant the electrodes. The biggest risks with these types of techniques are infection, bleeding, and tissue damage.